Mahmood rejects sentencing changes after two-tier claims by Sam Francis, political reporter, and Dominic Casciani, home and legal correspondent. Yeah, you know, this story is actually sort of dull at this point, because for the last few years we've been watching with increasing shock and horror at the fact that hundreds of people that are unfortunate enough to A, live in the United Kingdom, and B, be somewhat pale with piercing blue eyes like my good self, because that then meant they would be treated like the proverbial red-headed stepchild by the courts. And they noticed this juxtaposed alongside myriad instances of people that didn't have those aforementioned pale skin and piercing blue eyes, who would be treated with very soft, tender kid gloves by a legal system that is now the joke of the entire Western world. I could point you at hundreds of them, nay, thousands, but I won't bore you with those details, so I'll just do like a top 3 of my favourites that I've recalled over the last few years. Mercy for the drunk girl gang who are always treated better than everybody else because they complain the loudest and the longest. A gang of Somali, yeah, the obvious, regulars at Alan's legendary snack bar who repeatedly kicked a woman in the head whilst shrieking, and I'm quoting here, "Kill the white." Were all spared jail because the judge was told their religion meant they're not used to drinking. Yep, top drawer argument. Obviously they were all let off. Newcastle teens jailed for Gordon Galt gang killing. If you can't tell by the imagery there, they aren't from Newcastle, A. And B, the fact that they aren't from Newcastle ensured that they got, well, I'm sure you all know by now, they killed a 14-year-old boy with machetes, and one of them, who was jailed for only 2 years and 8 months, was released after 6 months in prison for killing a child with a machete. Totally reasonable, because they're definitely from Newcastle. And everybody knows Geordies get looked after by the legal system. Aye, poor old Raoul Moat. He merely critically injured that copper, and he got a bullet in the head. Talk about two-tier justice. 6 months for killing a child, bullet in the head. If you're a little bit more from Newcastle than these two boys. And one of my personal favourites, a failed asylum seeker who was jailed for surprise sexing a child, was given £50,000 in damages because the judges said he was unlawfully kept behind bars while the Home Office was trying to deport him. And trying is obviously the operative word, because you know for a fact we didn't manage it. I mean, he only violently buggered a child. You can't kick people out for things like that. I mean, unless they're female Canadian backpackers with PhDs, then you can throw them out unceremoniously if they don't pay a parking ticket. And therein lies the problem. So this story, it's almost dull, but I'll read you it anyway, just for a laugh, because what else are we going to do? Suffice it to say though, without having to start on the story, if a gentleman from Denmark buggered a big-eared boy, might I suggest he'd get a very lengthy spell in prison and not gifted £50,000 by the state. I like to think that all of those 3 stories I've just mentioned do a much better job of anything we're going to read in this pointless, trivial BBC tat. But what else are we going to do tonight, eh? Okay, let's read the ramblings of the BBC. Without doubt, the world's worst taxpayer-funded propaganda organisation. Also, that is a honking bit of kit right there, isn't it? I've never supported the use of the burqa, but when I take one look at that howling creature's mannish face, I almost think we should have it ruthlessly enforced by the state like the Iranians do. The Justice Secretary has called for the scrapping of planned changes which would make the background of offenders from minority groups a bigger factor when deciding whether to jail them. What? Even bigger than it is now? Shabana called for the Sentencing Council to reverse course after the Conservatives accused Labour of overseeing two-tier justice in which prison sentences are less likely for ethnic or faith minorities. Yes, Will, we already knew that, lad, so what's the point? As usual, the Conservatives are only opening their mouths 10 years too late. On Wednesday, the council, which is independent but sponsored by the Ministry of Justice, published new guidelines for judges aimed at avoiding bias and cutting reoffending. But Mahmood said she would write to its leaders to register my displeasure and recommend reversing the changes. As someone who is from an ethnic minority background, I do not stand for any differential treatment before the law for anyone of any kind. There will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. The updated sentencing guidance, which is due to come into force from April, places a great emphasis on the need for pre-sentence reports for judges. Pre-sentence reports give judges details on the offender's background, motives and personal life before sentencing, then recommend a punishment and what would work best for rehabilitation. But over recent years, their use has decreased. Magistrates and judges will be advised to get a pre-sentence report before handing out punishment for someone of an ethnic or faith minority alongside other groups such as young adults, abuse survivors and pregnant women. These factors are not an exhaustive list, the council said. A pre-sentence report can still be necessary if an individual does not fall into one of these cohorts. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick said the new guidelines were biased against straight white men. And if you can't see that, you haven't got any eyeballs. You are about as clear-sighted as Stevie Wonder with a bin liner taped over his head. When they have to reel off these lists, young adults, abuse survivors, anyone can say they're a survivor of abuse, women, pregnant women, certain religions, certain colours, certain ethnicities, the only one left is straight white men. So, by reeling off this exhaustive list, which apparently isn't an exhaustive list because they can think of plenty more silly categories and characteristics if they really put some effort in, the only person that will end up getting locked up is Johnny Whiteman. And alas, for the poor victims of crime in the United Kingdom, Johnny Whiteman doesn't appear to be doing the majority of the crime these days, and certainly not by a per capita basis. It's not middle-aged, middle-class white boys who are doing all the stabbing. No, or the mugging, or the grooming. In fact, some groups are 20 times more likely, or in the case of the Albanians, 88 times more likely to commit said acts than a boring middle-aged white man from Slough. So, all this story does is confirm something that we've known for a very long time. The 3 stories I put up at the start of this video illustrate it much better than the ramblings of Shaban and Mahmood, who's simply daft enough to say the quiet part out loud. This has all been known for many years in the United Kingdom. Anybody who pays even slight attention to the local news is well aware of it. There was also a young Royal Marine recruit killed, as usual, by a gentleman from the third world who was also treated with kid gloves despite being arrested again and again and again and again and again. So, we already know this, BBC. It's almost boring that it's took you 7 years to catch up when I've been reporting this news as a citizen journalist for many years, and I don't need the taxpayers' money to do it. But that's just what I think, ladies and gentlemen. If you think I'm barking up the wrong tree, and quite clearly there isn't a two-tier justice system in the UK, it's just a strange coincidence that blokes like Mr. Mellier get sent to prison for years for putting up politely worded stickers, and big gangs of Malis chanting about murdering people all get let off with very small fines. You let me know in the comments, please, because I love talking to the mentally ill. Alright, thanks for tuning in, ladies and gents. I'm sure I'll see you all tomorrow. Take it easy. Toodle pip. Cheers.